When I'm not bumming cough syrup off my tweaker neighbors, I like to answer questions I get from YouTube. So let's get right to it. If you could have a setup of one guitar, one amp, and one pedal, what would your setup look like? This is a great question, and I'll be interested in what you guys think too, so hit me up in the comments. But I kind of have two answers, and it's an inner struggle for me to know which one would win. I have the utilitarian in me, which just wants like the most versatile, can do everything rig, which to me would be like a Music Man John Petrucci Majesty going through an EHX Cathedral reverb pedal into like a Mesa 525, because then you could have like any kind of distortion. You can play anything from like jazz to metal, really anything. But then there's like the purist in me, and just like the rig that like speaks to my soul and who I am as like a human. That would be like a 62 Fender Strat into like a true bypass tuner pedal into like a Fender Bassman. And that's just like the most pure answer that my heart can like come up with. So it really is kind of like the inner struggle of which to be. But I think I'm gonna go and follow my spirit on this one with the Bassman rig. How do you implement irregular chords, the major 7s, 6s, diminished, and so on, into your songwriting? Is it just trial and error, or is there a method to this madness? So a lot of my videos focus on chord building and kind of like taking a root note and then applying a shape, whether it be like a major 7 or a minor 6 or a minor 7 or whatever. And that's all well and good, but like how do you use these chords in context is a question that I get asked a lot. And I think to a certain extent, the person who asked the question is right that a lot of it is trial and error. Now you can kind of get mathematical and think of the theory behind it, like, okay, major 7s go on the 1 and the 4, and the dominant 7 goes on the 7, and minor 9 goes here and stuff like that too. But honestly, once I started learning these chords, I would just kind of like experiment them by placing the shape on any root note. And I would kind of like the root note, I would let the root note of a progression, even it could be like a super simple progression, like a G to a B to an A. And I wouldn't even think about if it's major or if it's minor or whatever. And I would just kind of like experiment, like, okay, like G, major 7, and I would start there, okay, and that's kind of like my bass. And then I would go to the B, and it's like, okay, maybe I want to do like a major triad. So G major 7 to B major, no, that's not what I'm looking for. B minor 6, no, and I would kind of cycle through just the voicings I knew, and I wasn't thinking about the theory or whatever. I was letting my ear lead the way, and then maybe I'd eventually settle on like, oh, minor 7, like, oh, that's pretty cool. And then I'd go to the A. It's like, do I want this to be major, minor? Maybe I decide on minor first, and then I go through a few of them, minor 7, minor 6, 9, and then eventually I end up with something like G major. And just through trial and error, I think your ear really develops. And that's why 7th chords or any kind of extended chord is a really great thing to get into your musical vocabulary, because that extra note, just that 4th note that you're adding, which makes it a 7th, I think is an invaluable tool in training your ear and how melody works over a chord progression or anything like that. So I would say just learn a couple of chord shapes. I've got videos on this. There's a ton of great videos by other teachers and stuff out there. And then just experiment them by placing those chord shapes on a different root note on a guitar. And that's a great strength of a guitar, is that you can use one shape and use it on any root note, and you know the name of the shape. Where it sits in context, that's just up to you. And that's why some of the best chord progressions don't stay in one key. And thinking of keys is a really helpful thing to do, but I really think just experiment, throw in any shape on a root note, and eventually your ear is going to mature, and then you'll more quickly be able to grab the chord voicing you want, and I think your songwriting may become more interesting and improve. Thoughts on the new Red Hot Chili Peppers album? So a little background on me. John Frusciante was hands down one of the most influential guitarists for me learning the instrument. Frusciante was not the original guitar player for the Chili Peppers, but the guitar player for the Chili Peppers through, their biggest span of work or their most popular catalog. And he left the band a couple albums ago and was replaced with a guy named Josh Klinghoffer, right? And I think ever since Frusciante left, part of me was a little bit less interested in what the Chili Peppers were doing, even though I love the band, I love all those guys. I think they're all monster players, super creative and great. But especially when I'm With You came out, which is like their second to last album, I was kind of like unimpressed, and I just kind of thought that ship had sailed for the band, because whatever, they're getting older, and they put their work in and they sounded great. But then The Getaway came out, and from the first track, the first single they released, I was like hooked. Like, it sounds fantastic and it's amazing. And the album just came out a couple weeks ago, and like, I love it. I think top to bottom, it might be their most consistently good album. Like, it's kind of hard to say so soon, like, especially you're comparing it to like, rock icon tracks and stuff in the past. But top to bottom, it's a great great album, and it's a really fresh new voice for them. And I think the main thing is they let Klinghoffer kind of be himself and not try to be like a Frusciante replacement. And I think a lot of that is probably due to the producer of the band. The guy who produced this is Danger Mouse. And if you're not familiar with Danger Mouse, he's worked with a lot of great, anything from like Gorillaz to A$AP Rocky to Norah Jones. Like, he's a really Black Keys for sure. Like, he's an awesome producer. And another thing I was surprised to find out was that Nigel Godrich mixed the album and kind of produced a little bit himself. If you don't know who he is, he's the guy who mixes and produces all of Radiohead stuff. So it's no surprise that a Danger Mouse, Nigel Godrich, Chili Peppers collaboration ended up just being so great and fresh and awesome. And I think those two guys kind of helped lead the band in a new direction, because I think a lot of you who like maybe have stuck with the band for a long time, you'll notice that maybe like as they get older, the catalog kind of gets stale, and either have to like evolve in like a totally inorganic way to just try to stay relevant. But I think The Getaway specifically is a great step forward in a new direction. And I think to a deeper point, if you're looking for maybe new music to listen to, I think one great thing that you can do is follow the producers of bands that you like. I think that's kind of like an underrated aspect of the sound of a lot of bands. Like you go on like a website like allmusic.com and you can see the credits of who produced the album, who mixed the album, stuff like that. And it's a great way to kind of find, and then you can see what other projects he's worked on. It's a great way to find maybe music that somehow you haven't heard of that is in the same vein of what you like. So really just kind of follow the producers, because they have a tendency to work with, similar like artists. And that's, for me, I found a lot of great bands just by like, oh, who's Danger Mouse working with recently? And like, it's a great way to find new music. So for listening homework this week, since we're kind of talking about the Chili Peppers, I want to throw back to a song, an underrated song on probably what's their landmark album, Blood Sugar Sex Magik. It's called I Could Have Lied. And this is one of the first songs that I learned on guitar, and specifically the guitar solo for I Could Have Lied, I think is just a beautiful representation of what minimal, bluesy guitar soloing should be, right? Like, Frusciante is kind of the master at playing things that really kind of resonate with people, but they aren't super technical and hard to play. So I'm going to link you to a tab on how to play the solo for I Could Have Lied, and just give it a shot, because like a beginner or even like, low intermediate player can play this solo. It's not fast, it's not too difficult, but it's a really emotive and building solo. So check out the solo for I Could Have Lied, and really just anything off that album is great. Listen to the new Chili Peppers album, and as always, if you have any questions or comments, leave them below, and I will get to them soon. Thanks.